My name is Diana Myers, and I was 28 years old the morning my mother showed up to a will reading she wasn't invited to. My parents had disowned me at 13. I'd refused to give my sister my summer scholarship, and for that, they packed my things into a duffel bag and told me I didn't belong. I hadn't spoken to them in 15 years. My Uncle Harold took me in that same week. He raised me, he built me. And when he died in January of 2025, he left behind 12 commercial buildings, a $23.7 million estate, and a will that named me, and only me, as everything. What happened in that conference room on March 14th? What my father had quietly arranged 2 weeks before, I'm still not sure I have words for. But I'll try. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. This is where we share stories of women who set quiet boundaries, and what happens when family finally notices. If today's story hits close to home, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning Harold died, I was sleeping 3 floors below his condo. Same building on Capitol Hill. Different unit, different lease. I'd moved into mine at 23 and never left. My routine hadn't changed much in 5 years. Black coffee, no sugar, glasses on. The same black-framed brand Harold wore, though I never told him that. Laptop in my work bag next to a brass fountain pen I kept in the inside pocket. I carried it everywhere. I'll tell you about the pen later. I'd been CFO of Myers Property Holdings for exactly 3 months when he passed. Harold had signed the appointment himself, handed me the paperwork across his desk, and said, "You've earned it. Don't make me regret it." That was his version of a ceremony. I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have a wide circle. I had 6 tenants I spoke with weekly, an accounting team of 4, and Margaret Whitfield, Harold's attorney of 22 years, who I was starting to think of as the closest thing to a mentor I had left. I hadn't called my mother in 15 years. She hadn't called me either. That was the deal. I didn't have a number for her. She didn't have one for me. Somewhere in Portland, my parents and my older sister Tiffany had continued their lives, and I'd continued mine, and the 274 miles of I-5 between us was as good a wall as any. I'd built a life that took up exactly the space I needed and not 1 inch more. Most mornings, that felt like enough. The morning of January 9th, I walked upstairs to check on Harold and found his bedroom door open, the reading lamp still on, and his body still warm. He'd died in his sleep. He was 71. To understand how I got here, I have to go back to August of 2010. Portland, Oregon. I was 13. I'd been awarded a summer enrichment scholarship at Portland State, a 6-week academic program in math and writing. I'd applied on my own. Wrote the essay at the public library after school because my parents didn't have a printer. When the letter came, I taped it to the fridge. 2 days later, my mother sat me down at dinner. Tiffany was 16. She needed the scholarship for her college resume, my mother explained. "You're already smart, honey," she said. "Tiffany needs this more." I said no. My father slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. My mother's eyes went wet on command. I'd seen her do it before, at parent-teacher conferences when she wanted something waived. "If you can't put family first," she said, "you don't belong in this house." I looked at my father. He didn't say a word. Tiffany was already scrolling her phone. I went to my room, packed a duffel bag, took my library card, 2 changes of clothes, and the scholarship letter off the fridge. Slept on my friend Laura's couch that night with the bag under my head. The next morning, Laura's mother made me toast and asked if I wanted to call someone. I said no. Then the phone rang. It was Harold. He was my father's older brother, lived in Seattle, ran a commercial real estate company. I'd met him maybe 5 times at Thanksgiving, but for 2 years I'd been emailing him about books. He'd sent me a reading list once, and I'd kept writing back. He was the only adult in my family who ever asked me what I was reading. "Diana," he said, "pack what you have." He drove down from Seattle that same afternoon. Black sedan, window down, no sunglasses. He parked in front of Laura's house and didn't honk. Just waited. I walked out with my duffel bag. He looked at it, then at me. That everything? That's everything. He didn't hug me. Didn't give a speech. Just opened the passenger door and said, "We're going to Seattle. You can come back if you want. Anytime. But tonight, you're sleeping in a bed." 3 hours up I-5. Mostly silence. Harold played an old jazz station and didn't ask what happened. He didn't badmouth my parents. He didn't tell me everything would be fine. About an hour in, somewhere near Olympia, he pulled into a diner and bought me a grilled cheese and a glass of milk. I ate the whole thing without talking. Back in the car, he said one thing I've never forgotten. "I don't have kids, Diana. Never wanted them. But I have a guest room and a spare key, and I'd rather you sleep there than on somebody's couch." I nodded. That was the entire conversation. That night, I stood in his guest room on Capitol Hill, the room that would become mine for the next 10 years, and looked out the window. On clear days, you could see Mount Rainier from that angle, lit pink at sunset. That night, the mountain was hidden behind clouds, but I knew it was there. Harold came to the doorway, leaned against the frame. "I've been expecting something like this," he said. "I've seen how they are with you at holidays. I just didn't know when." He said goodnight, closed the door, and that was the last time anyone in my family made me feel like I didn't have a place to sleep. 15 years is a long time to compress into a few minutes, but here's what matters. Harold enrolled me at Lakeside School that fall. Private, rigorous, the kind of place where nobody cared who your parents were as long as you showed up prepared. He paid tuition without discussing it. His only rule: your money, your decisions. Mine is mine. On my 14th birthday, he gave me a brass cross fountain pen. Heavy, warm-toned, engraved with his initials, HM, on the clip. It had been his since 1986. "Use it for things that matter," he said. I kept it in my jacket pocket every day after that. I graduated. University of Washington, Foster School of Business, Finance, summa cum laude, 3.94 GPA. Harold didn't come to the ceremony. He said graduations were for parents, and he wasn't trying to be one. But he left a card on my desk at the office the next Monday. It said, "Good. Now do something with it." I did. CPA license at 25, senior financial analyst at Myers Property Holdings at 23. Yes, I started there during college. Director of finance at 26. I learned the portfolio from the ground up. Harold taught me how to read a lease before I could legally sign one. "The lease tells you who has the power," he'd say. "Read carefully." 3 months before he died, Harold called me into his office and signed my CFO appointment. He used the brass pen, my pen, the one he'd given me, then handed it back. "Hold on to this," he said. "There's a folder I've left with Margaret. It's for after." I asked what was in it. He shook his head. After. Harold taught me 2 things in 15 years, how to read a balance sheet, and how to keep my mouth shut when I didn't have to speak. The first scare came in 2023. Harold collapsed in his office on a Tuesday afternoon, cardiac arrhythmia. The paramedics got there in 4 minutes. He was back at his desk by Thursday, reading lease renewals like nothing happened. But something had happened. His color changed. He moved slower. He started leaving earlier, which Harold had never done in 40 years of business. By late 2024, the arrhythmia had worsened. 2 hospital stays in November. 1 in December. I took leave from operations and slept on the couch in his condo upstairs, checking on him every 4 hours like the cardiologist instructed. In his last week, he handed me a single sheet of paper with handwritten instructions. His writing was shaky, but legible. "Margaret has the will. I trust her. Don't sign anything without her. And Diana, don't let your father anywhere near this." January 9th, 2025, 6:14 in the morning. I found him in his bed with the lamp on, a book open on his chest, a biography of someone I can't remember now, and his face completely still. He'd gone in his sleep. No pain, no struggle. The paramedics said his heart just stopped. He was 71. He'd built Myers Property Holdings from a single duplex he bought in 1982 into a portfolio of 12 commercial buildings worth $23.7 million. He'd never married, never had children. He'd taken in his brother's discarded daughter and given her a desk, a title, and a life. The funeral was small. 30 people. Harold had pre-planned everything. The venue, the music, the guest list. My parents were not on it. But my mother and sister came anyway. They walked in 20 minutes late, wearing black, and my mother started hugging strangers before she even signed the guest book. Sandra Myers has a gift. She can walk into any room and make it about her within 90 seconds. At Harold's funeral reception, she worked the crowd like she was hosting. She hugged the caterer. She clasped the hand of Harold's property manager and said, "He was such a dear man. My dear brother-in-law." She'd met him maybe twice. Tiffany stood near the back, holding her phone low, recording a video she'd later post on Instagram with the caption, "Saying goodbye to a great man." 214 likes. She was 31, married, 2 kids, and still curating her life for strangers. My father wasn't there. Sandra told someone he was working. I heard from a cousin that he'd stayed in Portland. I wasn't surprised. Richard Myers only showed up when there was money to discuss, and nobody had told him the numbers yet. I was standing by the coffee when Sandra found me. She smelled like department store perfume and hairspray. She put both hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eyes for the first time in 15 years. "Honey, blood is blood," she said. "Let's not let the past define us today." I didn't respond. I picked up my coffee, turned, and walked to the other side of the room. Tiffany caught me near the coat rack. "Mom is really hurting," she said. "You should talk to her. I'm sure she'll find a way to express that." Tiffany blinked. I think she expected me to fold. People usually do, with Sandra. That's how it works. Sandra performs grief, and everyone around her adjusts. I didn't adjust. I put on my coat. On my way out, Sandra pressed a piece of paper into my palm, her phone number. Written in the same round handwriting I remembered from grocery lists on the fridge when I was 12. I put it in my pocket. That was a mistake. 3 days after the funeral, I took the elevator to the 14th floor of the Morrison and Sullivan building downtown. The receptionist led me to a corner conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows facing west. Mount Rainier filled the frame, white and sharp against a January sky. Margaret Whitfield was already seated. Navy suit, reading glasses on a chain, a stack of files arranged in 3 neat rows. She stood when I walked in and shook my hand, with the kind of grip that told you she'd been doing this for decades. "I worked with your uncle for 22 years, she said. "He was the most deliberate man I've ever represented." She sat me down and explained what Harold had arranged. The will reading would not be a private affair. Harold had structured it as a combined event, a celebration of life, and a formal executor confirmation. 47 invited attendees, lawyers, accountants, auditors, 2 of his longtime tenants, and representatives from 3 charitable organizations he'd named as contingent beneficiaries. "He designed this on purpose," Margaret said. "He told me his brother would make trouble. He wanted witnesses." Then she placed something on the table between us, a sealed Kraft manila folder, thick with papers, with 5 words written across the front in Harold's handwriting, "Diana, for after." "He left instructions," Margaret said. "You open this only after the funeral, in private, not before." I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. "Harold did not trust your father," she said. "He told me so the day he updated the will." I wanted to ask what that meant, but Harold had taught me something about patience. You don't ask questions when the answer is sitting in your hands. You take it home. You wait. I took the folder home. I didn't open it. Not yet. The text started 3 days later. I was at my desk reviewing a lease renewal for one of our Belltown buildings when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Long message. "Honey, I know things have been hard between us, but family needs to come together right now. We need to talk about Harold's estate. Your father is grieving." I stared at the screen, read it twice, set the phone face down. 20 minutes later, another one. It's only right. We're family. We can work this out like adults. The next day, a voicemail. Sandra's voice, warm and measured, the same tone she used when she wanted a refund at the supermarket. Diana, sweetheart, call me back. We should do this together. Then another text. Your father was Harold's brother. That means something. I didn't respond to any of them. Not one. I saved the number under a contact name I wouldn't accidentally open. Do not open. And turned off notifications. Harold had a saying about people who suddenly remember your name after years of silence. When someone shows up at the door with flowers and no occasion, he'd say, check what's behind their back. Sandra had shown up with flowers at the funeral. She'd hugged strangers, kissed cheeks, and called Harold dear. Now she was texting about the estate 3 days later. The flowers were still fresh. The math was already running. I forwarded every message to Margaret with a single note. For the file. Margaret wrote back, noted, keep everything. I did. Every text, every voicemail, every timestamp. I didn't know yet what they'd be worth, but Harold didn't raise me to throw away documentation. The following Friday, I came home at 6:30 to find my parents sitting in the lobby of my building. Sandra was perched on the edge of a bench near the mailboxes, legs crossed, purse in her lap. Richard stood beside her, hands in his pockets, jaw tight, wearing the same flannel jacket I remembered from when I was 12. They looked like they'd been waiting a while. Richard spoke first. We just want to talk. 5 minutes. I didn't invite them upstairs. I didn't sit down. I set my bag on the floor and kept my keys in my hand. There's nothing to talk about. If there's anything relevant, the attorney will contact you. Her name is Margaret Whitfield. Morrison and Sullivan. Sandra's face shifted. A flicker of something behind the warmth. Something harder. Diana, you don't understand. Your father is Harold's brother. He has rights. He doesn't. Honey. Sandra stood, took a step forward. Blood is blood. We're still family. I let the sentence sit in the air between us. 15 years since she'd used the word family in reference to me. 15 years since she'd told me I didn't belong in her house. Margaret Whitfield, I said again. Morrison and Sullivan, she's the one to contact. I picked up my bag, walked past both of them, and pressed the elevator button. Sandra didn't follow. Richard did. 2 steps, then stopped. As the doors opened, I glanced back. Richard already had his phone out dialing. I heard him say, Frank, it's me. We're going to have to move on this. The doors closed. I rode up alone. I didn't know who Frank was, but I'd learned from Harold. When someone names a person you haven't heard of, write it down. I pulled out my phone and typed, Frank. Richard called him. Friday, 6:45 p.m. Tiffany's approach was different. She went digital. Over the next 4 days, she sent me 14 Instagram direct messages. The first few were warm. Hey sister, can we talk? I miss you. The kind of thing that might have worked on someone who hadn't watched Tiffany perform kindness her entire life. By day 2, the tone shifted. Mom is crying every night. She's devastated. By day 3, we were kids, Diana. Mom and Dad are older now. They've changed. You're being cruel. Day 4, if you embarrass our family at that reading, you'll regret it. I didn't respond to a single message. Not one word. Then she showed up at my office building, the Myers Property Holdings headquarters on 2nd Avenue. She walked through the front door and told the receptionist she was my sister. Security stopped her in the lobby. I watched from the 3rd floor window as she argued with the guard for 6 minutes, then left. That afternoon, she posted a story on Instagram. A black screen with white text. Some people forget where they came from. 200 likes. 38 comments. Mostly heart emojis from people who had no idea what she was talking about. My coworker James saw the post. He didn't say anything. I appreciated that. What I noticed, scrolling back through Tiffany's profile that night for the first time in years, was that she'd been building this narrative long before Harold died. Family first, captions. Group photos where I was conspicuously absent, quotes about forgiveness and sisterhood posted on Mother's Day. She'd turned our estrangement into content. She'd made herself the peacemaker of a war she'd helped start. I closed the app and didn't open it again. The next week, I sat in Harold's old office at the top of the building. It was mine now, technically, but I hadn't moved anything. His leather chair still held the shape of him. His reading glasses sat on the desk next to a stack of lease files and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Landlord," which I'd given him as a joke 3 Christmases ago. I opened the portfolio review. 12 buildings, 3 in Sodo, a warehouse, a light industrial complex, and a small retail strip. 4 in Belltown, mixed use, strong rents. 2 on Capitol Hill, one of them our own building. 3 in Pioneer Square, older, character-heavy, the kind of properties Harold loved most. Total appraised value, $23.7 million. Net operating income, $1.9 million annually. Harold had built this from a single duplex he bought in 1982 for $67,000. 42 years of patient, deliberate work. I remembered sitting in this same chair at 19, watching Harold explain a lease to me line by line. "The lease tells you who has the power," he said, running his finger down the rent escalation clause. "Read carefully. Every landlord-tenant relationship is a negotiation, and the person who reads the fine print wins." I'd read every lease in this portfolio at least twice. Harold knew that. It's why he promoted me. I closed the binder and noticed something on the desk I'd missed before. Harold's personal notebook. A small leather-bound pad he carried in his breast pocket. I opened it to the last entry, dated January 6th, 3 days before he died. 2 lines in his neat but shaky cursive. "Call Margaret about the Diana folder. She needs to see it before the reading." I set the notebook down, picked up the craft folder from my bag. I'd been carrying it for a week without opening it. Tonight, I decided. I'd open it tonight. 2 days later, I was leaving the Morrison and Sullivan building after a meeting with Margaret about the reading logistics. I took the stairs to the lobby. I always took the stairs, and as I pushed through the stairwell door, I heard a voice I recognized. Richard. My father. Standing near the elevator bank, phone pressed to his ear, talking loud enough that the receptionist was pretending not to listen. "Frank, listen, we just need to file something quick. Undue influence. He was sick the last 6 months. Everyone knows that. We need to get ahead of it before she signs anything." I stopped. Pressed myself against the wall next to a potted fern. Held my breath. A pause. Frank's reply. Muffled. Indistinct. Richard again. "I don't care what it costs. He had no kids. The estate has to come back to family. That's how it works." Another pause. Then Richard lowered his voice. But not enough. "Just have the papers ready by the 14th. That's the reading." He hung up, adjusted his jacket, walked toward the parking garage without looking back. I stood there for a full minute. Then I took the back exit to the street, got in my car, and called Margaret. "Richard is hiring a lawyer," I said. "Someone named Frank. He's planning to file an undue influence claim. He wants it ready by the reading date." Margaret was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "Thank you. I'll look into it. Don't do anything else." "I won't." "Diana." "Yes. Your uncle prepared for this. That's why the reading is structured the way it is." She hung up. I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel. Then I drove home and pulled the craft folder out of my bag. I opened it at Harold's desk. 10:45 at night. The desk lamp casting a yellow circle on the walnut surface. Through the window behind me, Mount Rainier was invisible, just black sky and city lights reflected in the glass. The craft folder was sealed with a single strip of packing tape, Harold's handwriting on the front. "Diana. For after." I peeled the tape. Inside were 2 things. On top, a handwritten letter from Harold. 3 pages, dated June 14th, 2024. The same day the will was notarized. His handwriting was steadier then, clearer. He'd written this when he still had time. Underneath the letter, a stack of paper held together with a rubber band. 11 envelopes. Standard white, business-sized, each with Harold's Seattle address in the center and a Portland return address in the corner. My father's handwriting. I read Harold's letter first. Diana, I didn't show you these because I didn't want you to feel like something owed. You came to me at 13 with a duffel bag and a library card, and you showed up every single day after that. That was always enough. Your father has been writing to me since the year you arrived. 11 letters in 14 years. Each one asks for money. Some of them mention you, as something to negotiate with. Sandra mentioned Diana might want to come visit if you could see your way to helping us with the mortgage. That's a direct quote from letter number 4. I set the page down, picked up the envelopes, opened them one by one. 11 letters, 11 requests, 2010 through 2024. Some handwritten, some typed. All from Richard, all asking Harold for money, and scattered through them like inventory. My name, Diana, mentioned 9 times across 11 letters, always as leverage. I went back to Harold's letter, the last paragraph. Your father gave up on you once, then realized you had value when I had money. I never gave up. That's the difference. Diana, you were never the spare. You were the one who showed up. I read that line 3 times. Then I closed the folder, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I was going to do at that reading. If this story is hitting somewhere that's been quiet a long time, drop a single word in the comments. Just one word. That's enough. And if you're new here and this is the kind of story that gives you space to breathe, go ahead and subscribe. We post these every week. Stories about women who stop explaining and start deciding. I'll see you after the break. I was at Morrison & Sullivan by 7:30 the next morning. Margaret was already there, coffee untouched, reading something on her screen. I placed the craft folder on her desk. She opened it without asking, read Harold's letter in silence, then opened the envelopes, one by one, scanning each letter with the same clinical focus she'd use on a contract dispute. When she finished, she took off her reading glasses and looked at me. This explains a great deal. I want them at the reading, I said. She paused. The will doesn't require their attendance. We could proceed without them. I know, but if they're going to make a scene, and they will, I want 47 witnesses when they do, including you. Margaret studied me for a long moment. Then she pulled a legal pad from her drawer and began writing. I'll send formal invitations by certified mail, she said. They'll know it's official. They'll think it's an opportunity. Good.